Welcome everyone to the fifth gathering of our spring Morehead-Cain event season and the second of our 7 talks. We've assembled an amazing lineup of talks and panel discussions for you this spring, so please have a look on the MCN and RSVP. For today's 7 talk, we are thrilled to welcome Ray Sawyer, class of 2013. Ray was slated to be a 7 speaker at the West Coast Symposium last March, which of course had to be canceled when COVID shut everything down. And we were delighted that Ray was willing to join us now almost a year later to finally give his talk. Ray, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Megan. Hey, y'all. This is an honor for me to be here, and I'm really excited for this conversation. I'm here to talk about the memories that make us and why looking back helps create the way forward. I'll talk for a little bit at the beginning, but then I'm really excited for some reflection and some discussion with all of you here. So if it's okay with all of you, let's get right into it. I see some of the faces, so can I just get a thumbs up to make sure everyone can hear me okay? Awesome. Let's get into it. It was December 1995. A little boy sits on the concrete sidewalk in Elizabeth City, North Carolina, waiting for the holiday parade to turn downtown and come his way. He occasionally darts out into the street to retrieve a couple of hands of Starburst or Double Bubble from the yellow lines, but he always returns back to base, sitting there on the concrete sidewalk, waiting for the main event. For him, it's not the floats or the classic cars or the motorcycles, but he's awaiting the Camden County High School Marching Band. Their drum major is sort of a hero of his. So finally, the moment has come and the band turns his way and the little boy starts screaming the drum major's name, Connie, Connie, Connie. And as the band gets closer, he screams louder. And eventually the band approaches and then passes him by. And so his excitement turns into confusion and eventually settles at disappointment. Later that afternoon, the little boy is sitting at home and the drum major's at the front door. And so he walks into the house, but he's no longer in his all white outfit with the Camden blue trim and a Santa Claus hat on. He's just dressed like my oldest brother. So, of course, I give him the cold shoulder, and eventually I yell at him and I say, I know you heard me yelling at you. How come you didn't answer? And he says, I was focused on the job, but I heard you the whole time. Now, the little kid in me doesn't care what his answer is. I'm still mad. And so for the next 3 hours, I proceed to keep giving him the silent treatment. And then I forgot all about it afterwards. But as time has gone on, I have realized the magnitude of that statement. I was focused on the job, but I heard you the whole time. I realized that many of the decisions my oldest brother made, he was hearing me, he was hearing his younger siblings. And he even told me that his decision to go to Carolina was based on the idea that he wanted to be close enough to still have a relationship so his little brother would remember who he was. That led him to going to UNC as a Morehead-Cain scholar. That led him to joining the Marching Tar Heels band and being their drum major. And I remember those Saturdays of coming to visit him for football games. And now when I yelled his name, he could actually hear me and respond. And so he would even invite me to the front of the band, and I would march with all the drum majors from Wilson Library all the way down to Kenan Stadium. And eventually that band became my band, all because he heard me way back when. So why do I start out with this memory? Well, first, I think it tells you a little bit about who I am. I'm Ray Sawyer, Morehead-Cain class of 2013. I'm the youngest of 9 siblings, 5 boys, 4 girls. I broke the tie. 7 of us graduated from Carolina. And for most of my life, my main title has been as somebody's little brother. I'll be honest, there were many times where that frustrated me a little bit because I wanted to have my own sense of identity. But the more I unpack it, I recognize that in many of the decisions my siblings were making, it's because they heard me and they wanted to chart a path so I could maximize my potential and be the best that I can be. Everything they did, they heard me. So why am I here today? Alumni and finalists, as you're very well aware, this Morehead-Cain network is packed full of people with tremendous experiences and knowledge and all of those things in between. And I dare not try to size up to that. But I think about how often do we get a dedicated space to think about what memories made us who we are right now? How often do we get to unlock the expertise within our own memories? So with that in mind, I want to share another memory with you. It may seem somewhat unrelated, but I'll do my best to tie them together somehow. This time, it's early 2019. We're in Palo Alto, California. Kim Robertson of the Morehead-Cain staff is hosting an event for some West Coast alumni. And at the beginning of the evening, she mentions to me that Sasha Seymour is going to stop by. Now, I'd never met Sasha before, but I was a fan. I had heard about his academic accolades and his scholarships and his basketball career. And honestly, I was geeking out. I was trying to figure out what I could say to introduce myself to him. And I completely stopped listening to what Kim and the other alumni were talking about in the conversation. A few minutes later, Sasha shows up and I stand up from the table, prepared to fumble through some type of introduction. And before I can get a word out, Sasha says, "Ray Sawyer, it's so good to finally meet you." I have no idea what's going on. I'm trying to force a smile, but I'm confused at this point. And so I'm awkwardly smiling and don't know what to do. And Sasha continues. He says, "We've never met before, but I've known you for a long time. My cousin went to your high school. You were in the same class, and I was at your high school graduation. I remember this kid stood up and he gave the salutatorian address and he sat down, and 2 minutes later, somebody introduced him again and he stood up and gave the student body president speech. And in that moment, I had two thoughts. The first was, why didn't they just let him stay up there and keep talking? And the second thought, I turned to my Aunt Bobby and said, "Who's that kid?" She said, "That's Ray Sawyer. He's going to be a Morehead-Cain scholar. They're the best." So Sasha went home that day and got on Google and looked up the Morehead-Cain. And that was his first exposure to the scholarship. And he decided from that moment that he wanted to be a Morehead-Cain scholar. And fast forward 2 years later, and he was standing up at his graduation, giving the valedictorian speech and giving the student body president speech. And as he's telling me all this, I'm sitting there without words. Now, to be clear, I dare not take credit for Sasha's success, but to even be associated with his journey in some small way makes me extremely proud. The other part of that I shared with Sasha recently is that moment of inspiration for him was birthed from a moment of disappointment for me. I'll explain why. As you can tell, Connie inspired me in so many different ways. He inspired me to be a Morehead-Cain scholar. He inspired me to be student body president. He inspired me to be valedictorian. And for 4 years of high school, I was the valedictorian. Up until just before graduation, where some discrepancies deemed me as salutatorian. I felt as if something I had earned and worked hard for was taken from me. And I actually considered not giving a speech at graduation as a form of silent protest. Eventually, I decided that I'd do the speech anyway and hope for the best. And it was 10 years later, meeting Sasha in Palo Alto, that I realized the impact of that decision. Okay, Ray, cool memories. So what does that all mean? I like to believe that every day, all the things that we do have a ripple effect. Some of those things we know it, some of those things we may never know. Connie intentionally had a ripple effect on my life by choosing to hear me and make decisions so I could have a relationship with him. I unknowingly had a ripple effect in Sasha's life by deciding to stand up that day at my high school graduation. Why else am I here today? Well, I had to take this opportunity to brag on my big brother. If anybody knows him, you know that he is always elevating and amplifying the family. And so I couldn't let this opportunity pass without showing him some love. Another reason why I'm here is because in transparency, there have been moments where I questioned if I could actually have impact in the world. Coming from my 2 stoplight town and my small graduating class and my humble beginnings, I wondered if I had anything of value. But then hearing Sasha's story and thinking about all the people that he's already impacted in his life so far and how I was a small part of that gives me some confidence that it is possible. The last thing I want to say is that I now believe we all have the capacity to reclassify the moments of failure as moments of inspiration. We have the ability to reclassify those moments of disappointment as moments of inspiration. That high school graduation for me, it was a disappointment. But by having the courage to persevere, something great came out of it. Now, to be honest, I could tell countless stories about people, especially in the Morehead-Cain network, who have made tremendous impact on my life. And even looking at some of the faces on this call sparked some of those stories. If you want to hear more, definitely ask me, but I want to pause now and invite you all for reflection, invite you for discussion. What are those memories that have helped you get to where you are now? How are we living each day to create those memories for others? I think about Connie as a symbol for the memories that made me. So that's looking back. And then I think about Sasha as evidence of the impact we all can have. That's looking forward. Who are those people in your life? What are those memories for you? What disappointments are you facing right now? How can we reclassify those as moments of inspiration? As we're all focused on whatever job it is that we have, who are you still hearing? That's what I have today. Thank you all for listening. I would love to open it up for some discussion now.
Thank you, Ray. Fantastic. Yeah. It's open for questions, but it also feels to me like it's open for comment and for sharing as well. And I see some hands up already. Taylor McCarthy, why don't you go ahead with the question?
Ray, I just wanted to say that I loved your story so much. I'm from Currituck, North Carolina, so literally right next to Camden.
What's up?
Yeah. And so I just wanted to ask you, Currituck is kind of smaller in the same aspect as Camden. So how did it go from being in such a small area to Chapel Hill where there's thousands of people and it's like such a different like community than what we grew up in?
I love that question. I love the opportunity to talk about Camden. And I love when people actually know where Camden is and I don't have to triangulate them between a bunch of other places. So I appreciate you. For me, when I got to Carolina, I faced a lot of imposter syndrome. I viewed myself from a deficit mindset that, oh, my school didn't have a lot of AP classes. We didn't have a ton of sports. I'd never been on an airplane before. I'm just here to learn from everyone else. And at some point, I realized that my rural upbringing was an asset because some people had never experienced that. And so whenever there was opportunity for me to learn, I would take advantage of that. But I also had to embody that there's something I possess in my experiences that somebody else can benefit from too. And so I think it's that combination of humility and willingness to learn, but also that confidence that no matter what your experience is, somebody can learn from that. I've taken that from Camden to Chapel Hill to all of my global experiences to even my current reality in Bay Area, California. Always learning from those around me, but I'm going to put the 252 on the map, and people have to learn about what it's like to be from that small area.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Awesome, thanks. Next is Will Fickling.
Hey, just to start, do you want me to call you Mr. Sawyer or Ray or
Call me Ray, it's all good. Call me Ray, it's all
okay.
good.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. So I loved what you had to say. Those two stories. They were really neat, and I really enjoyed listening to them. And I actually have my own little story for you, real quick. So UNC and Coach Williams had these basketball clinics after New Year's for like the little kid for grade school kids. And when I was there one year, Sasha Seymour, he hurt his knee or something, but he was hobbling around on one leg, still retrieving balls for us. Looking back on it now, it's really cool just how determined he was to make sure like our lives as little kids were better so that he could be able to help us out by this little clinic thing. So what all has Sasha meant to you?
I mean, first of all, Sasha's just a cool person. I feel like he brings so much energy to any environment that he's in. Every time I've heard his name come up, people's faces light up. And so that's the first thing. And I think the second thing is really he's the symbol for me that our impact often grows bigger than us. Sasha is doing things right now that I could never even imagine of. And again, I don't take credit for it, but to know that me showing up as my authentic self, me doing what I thought was right in a moment, was having an influence on somebody that I didn't even know. And so for me, he's really a reminder that when I'm going to the grocery store, being kind and generous to people, maybe having an impact down the line that I may never know. When I meet somebody for the first time, even in those bad situations, the way that I behave and show up could be having that ripple effect. And so Sasha embodies that for me.
Awesome, thanks for that, Will. Shavali Patel is next.
Hi, I just want to start off by saying thank you for sharing your story. It was really inspirational and it was very, very powerful. It gave me chills. But my question for you were, what are some other memories that you've made while being a scholar that you feel has made another impact on your life?
Wow. While being a scholar. So I had a roommate in college. His name was Joel Hodge, still one of my best friends to this day. And he is the reason that I studied abroad while I was at Carolina. He saw that I was facing some challenges and he knew that a different environment would inspire me. And studying abroad actually completely changed the trajectory of my career. It caused me to major in global studies. It caused me to travel tremendously during Carolina and pursue a Fulbright fellowship afterwards. It's caused me to always have that lens of cultural competency and cultural humility. And that all came because he wasn't just a roommate, but he was actually in tune to how I was feeling and was creative in ways to support me. And so that's just one example I'll share. There was another friend I had, Michael Lawson. We were in rural Uganda together for one of our public service summers. And in any other context, I don't think we would have been friends. But because we were living in the same homestay, sharing the same room, walking back and forth to work together every day, we noticed that we had so much in common and we really created a special bond. So those are a couple that stand out for me.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Next is Liam Furlong.
Thank you, Megan. Ray, first off, again, in the same vein, thank you so much for sharing these stories. I want to become a Morehead-Cain just to learn how to tell a story like you. This was just, oh my gosh, again, chills. And my question is, one thing that really stuck out to me in your story is how you describe yourself in relation to other people in your life. How you always felt like a little brother, how you always felt like a fan of Sasha, how you always felt like a valedictorian or salutatorian. But especially in that transition from either becoming being a senior in high school and moving on to the next step, a lot of those roles and a lot of those ways we see ourselves, whether that be like a team captain or a club leader, or even if traveling really far, a type of family member, sometimes those roles feel like they're stripped away from you. And my question to you, Ray, is, was there ever a moment, and you referenced this imposter syndrome, was there ever a moment at UNC as a Morehead-Cain, or even beyond, really, where you felt that you knew who Ray Sawyer was, titles aside?
Yeah, it's a very valid question. And I think it's not something that you achieve and then it's achieved. It's not like riding a bike. It's a everyday decision, because when you're surrounded with people who are incredible in their own right, I think my mind naturally tends to compare. And so it's a conscious decision to step out of that comparison and then to actually embrace what's going on. And so if I'm answering your question specifically, I believe my identity is that of a storyteller. I believe one of my strongest assets is my ability to observe the impact that other people have had on me and to reflect that back out to others. That's a form of appreciation, but it's also a catalyst for people to continue doing the things that they are doing and for other people to also jump on board. And so I like to think that I am a distributor of these types of practices and ideas. And I wouldn't say that's a label for me, but it's part of my mission. But that was birthed out of me searching and saying, who am I absent of all those titles that I may have had throughout? I hope that answers your question.
Absolutely, Ray. Thank you so much. That was beautiful.
Thanks, Liam and Ray. Kavya is next, but I would like to point out that Sasha Seymour is in the house. And since everybody's
Sasha, we've been
thinking,
talking
who is
about-
this Sasha? Who is this Sasha person? Sasha, hey, do you mind saying just hello to Ray real quick?
Yeah. Hey guys. Hello, Ray. Hello, everybody else on the call.
There's my guy.
What's up, brother? How you doing?
I'm feeling good. Good to see your face.
Good to see you too. I meant to join at the beginning of the phone call, but I had a work meeting that ran late. I'm sure Ray probably already told this story, and so I'm probably just repeating something he already said. But Ray and I had such a cool first like meeting, but not actual meeting. So it was my freshman year of high school, and I went up. It was right at the end of the year. I went up to my cousin's graduation in Camden, North Carolina, and I was sitting with my Aunt Bobby Joe. We were watching the commencement ceremony, and there was a young man who got up and he gave I think it was the senior class president speech, and then he went back and he sat back down, and then like 10 seconds later, a guy gets up and he announces the same person who then stood up and gave it was either like the valedictorian speech or the salutatorian speech or something like that. But he basically just gave the same speech like twice in a row. And my kind of two thoughts were, one, this is quite silly. Why didn't they just have him like stay up there and give like one speech? But then two, like, holy cow, who is this guy? And so I leaned over to my Aunt Bobby Joe, and I said, Aunt Bobby, like, who is that? And she leans over and she goes, oh, that's Ray Sawyer. Like, he's incredible. And I was like, whoa, like, what's he doing? And she's like, oh, he's going to be a Morehead scholar. Like, he's going to UNC. And I was like, what in the heck is a Morehead scholarship? Like what is that? And she was like, oh, it's like the best. It's the coolest. And so I went back to my home right after my cousin's graduation, and I Googled like what a Morehead scholarship was, and I found it out, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's the coolest thing in the world. And I had a bunch of other goals and other ambitions, other things that I wanted to do throughout my time in high school, but I knew kind of in the back of my mind that if I had a chance to get a Morehead scholarship and be something like Ray, that would be really awesome. And a few years later, I did get the Morehead, and it was several years before I actually met Ray out in San Francisco and got to tell him the story. But I think it just highlights a little bit the power, and again, Ray probably already shared this, but it highlights a little bit of the power of the influence that you have on other people, sometimes without even knowing it. Ray was kind of an inspiration for me for years and years and years of how somebody from a really small town in Eastern North Carolina, he's from Camden, I'm from New Bern, which is not all that big, but could go out and do really, really cool and big things and get a scholarship like the Morehead-Cain. So he's always been somebody that I've looked up to for years and years, and didn't even know that I had any idea who he was for the first decade of when we were together. So just want to say hello, and glad that I could take a chance to get to see Ray and to say hello. And Ray, I'm actually going to be seeing my Aunt Bobby for a very COVID safe wedding for my cousin Zach, who's actually was at the graduation of Ray's in about 3 weeks. So I'll tell Aunt Bobby you said hello.
Please do. Thanks so much, Sasha. And Megan, I know we have a lot of hands. I want to be respectful of that, but I also want to just recognize again, Connie. I hope he's on the call.
That's so funny. I was just messaging with Connie, and I said, Connie, I think you need to go next. Kavya, hold on. We're going to get to you, I promise. But Connie, we'd love for you to say something as well.
Hey, everybody. Good to see you all today. Ray, I probably should apologize in front of everybody for not acknowledging you that one day on the street. You probably deserved it. You'd probably done something that I couldn't do, but I'm glad that you're not mad at me anymore. But thank you for those words. And it is a very humbling experience to be confronted with the impact that you have on people and the impact that you can use to launch people into your future. I've told you this recently, and I'm glad to tell you in front of everybody, you're the best of who we are as a family. And I'm glad to know that I had even a small part to play in that. I did want to ask you, and this would be kind of a good discussion point. You brought the story up about, focusing and doing the job and, sort of positioning yourself so you can be an inspiration to other people. Because we have potential scholars on the line, current scholars and alums, what would you say focusing and doing the job for a Morehead-Cain scholar looks like?
Focusing and doing the job, what does that mean? I think it means well, first, I can't remember if I said this earlier, but when it comes to that, I view it as a privilege and not as pressure. I don't think it's something that we burden ourselves with where, oh, I'm going out today and how do I make sure I'm changing someone else's life? But I think it's living in such a way that if someone was to observe me, what they would observe would have a positive impact on them. So that's the first thing that I would say. The beauty of being a Morehead-Cain scholar is that there's no script of how exactly you should achieve your success or your purpose or your impact on the world. It is customizable to your personality and your own vision, but it gives you the space and the network and the capacity to actualize it. And so what it means is feeling what is on inside of your heart to do, and every day deciding to take some step to do it. I would leave it at that. Every day deciding to take a step to do it.
It's a great answer. Appreciate it. Love you, man.
Awesome. Thank you all. All right, Kava, you have been so patient. You are next.
Hi, thank you again to Ray, Sasha, Connie. Thank you all for sharing. My question was that as you were telling your story, Ray, I was thinking of the saying, one man's trash is another man's treasure, in the sense that a failure for one person can seem like a victory for another. So I was wondering how you balance that positive mindset while also acknowledging those negative, those adverse emotions that you feel when that you feel when you have a perceived failure.
I love that question. I think acknowledging disappointment and failure is actually important. I give myself permission not to have rose-colored glasses on and to always see everything on the bright side, because that's not in tune with reality. Sometimes things make me upset. Sometimes things seem unfair. But after I acknowledge that, it's my decision of what will I do about it. Can I learn from it to either prevent myself from experiencing it later, or maybe lessening someone else's experience negatively later on? And so, for example, in high school, I was extremely disappointed about the valedictorian salutatorian thing. After I was disappointed, I prepared a presentation and I went before the school board of Camden County and we discussed the situation, and they actually made some changes. So even though it didn't change my situation, I hope that it would have impacted someone who came after me. That's an example of acknowledging the hurt and pain, but also finding a way to move forward positively.
Awesome. Thank you. And thanks for your patience again, Katya. Owen Gast is next.
Hi, thank you so much again, Ray. Your words were very powerful. I know everyone said this, but really amazing stuff. The thing that really stuck out to me most about your talk was the concept of legacy, I think, and how our actions really do leave a ripple effect in the world, and we don't always see that. And I think I speak for my fellow finalists when I say that I've definitely been thinking a lot this week about the concept of legacy, since we are, possibly in a week or so going to be joining what I perceive to be incredible legacy of the Morehead-Cain Foundation and of UNC. So my question is, how do you think you went about, taking on the burden of that, that incredible legacy, and sort of carving your own piece out of that, and making your own way with respect to those who came before you, and leaving your mark for those who would come after you?
I appreciate that you use the word burden of the legacy. And I think in many ways we do think of it as a burden. I believe that when we relieve ourselves of that burden, we can actually do what we've accomplished to do. I believe that everyone who's come through the Morehead-Cain program, their desires for the folks after them to exceed anything that they accomplished. When I see a finalist, I want them to be far more successful and inspired and supported than I ever was. And so I view it not as a burden for you, but as a building block for you. And so I think that if you come into it with that mindset, you have the freedom to explore, the freedom to accomplish, and not the pressure to meet expectations. That's only my personal view. I'm sure other people have thoughts, but I hope that answers your question.
Yes, that's amazing. Thank you so much.
Awesome, thanks. Laurel Maubert is next.
Hi, Ray. Thank you so much for coming and speaking with us today. And I'm going to echo everyone else. Your story was just so inspiring and amazing. When I was listening to you talk, it really reaffirmed, and you talked about being a storyteller, and your power in your story really reaffirmed for me the power that stories can have on others and inspiring others, and why storytelling matters so much. So I just love to hear your thoughts on this. Why do you think that storytelling matters so much, and how do you think it can inspire others?
When I look back on most elements of my life, if someone gave me a fact, I may remember it for a little while. When someone tells me a story, it sticks. I think it connects to our human nature. I think it gives us an opportunity to build bridges with people that we may not initially think that we would have connected with. I think when people see themselves and what's being talked about, they pay more attention. Those are some of the reasons why I think storytelling is important. It connects with multiple emotions. I think even in the story that I told, perhaps you identified with me, perhaps you identified with Connie or Sasha's Aunt Bobby, or anyone else in between. So many opportunities for people to connect to it. And it doesn't require me to make assumptions about you. It requires me to tell my truth and give you the agency to take from it what you will. And I think in our world, I would appreciate more opportunities for us to give agency to people to show up how they want to show up, as opposed to dictating certain behaviors out of people when they come into certain environments. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
All right, next up, we have Nigel Parker.
Hi, I'll also share my thanks and appreciation for your words. It's really impactful today in this moment. But my question revolves around your concept of reclassifying moments of disappointment into moments of inspiration. I really think that that's kind of essential to life. But in my experience, a lot of that reclassification happens upon reflection. So I'm wondering, when you're in those moments of disappointment or perceived failure, there's a level of hurt there. But when you're actually in it, do you have some things that you tell yourself or draw upon, or maybe words from someone else? Do you have things that kind of get you through those moments and allow you to push through for that inspiration?
Yeah, so if I hear your question correctly, when I'm in the hurt, how do I deal with it until I can get to the reflection? So part of that is me acknowledging that hurt is going to come. Today is a great day. I'm interacting with all of you, but some hurt is going to come here for me. I prepare myself for that. How? I keep I'll call it a paper trail of reasons why I'm worth it. I've written a 60-second commercial that I read to myself, written by me, about how I think positively about me. And on those days when work is going terrible and I feel like I can't do anything right, I'll pull it up and make myself hear about myself in my own words. That's an example. Or if you got people around you that are supporting you and they say something good about you, are you able to write it down so you can reflect back on it? So in those days when you feel like nothing's going right, you have concrete evidence that shows, nah, you still got it going on. That's one way that I deal with myself in the hurt. I don't rush myself past it. When I'm hurting, and I'll say, hey, I'm hurting right now. And when I'm ready, I'll move on. By moving on too early, sometimes it can cause us more damage down the road. And so those are a couple of strategies that I apply. Give myself evidence, don't rush myself, and know that it's all part of the game. And that ability to be vulnerable, there's other people in your life that sometimes when they can share their vulnerabilities, it makes them a little bit more human too. And we realize that we all have those good days and bad days, and we're all going through this journey together.
Thank you so much.
Great. Claire Wilbur is next.
Hi, thank you for your words of wisdom. Throughout your speech, you spoke a little bit about how your siblings paved the path for you. And I'm just wondering how you were able to take advantage of their wisdom while also mitigating living in their shadows.
Ooh, that's the question that comes up often. I think that it's gonna sound weird, but my siblings are kind of like the buffet. They all had their different area of expertise, and I got to walk through with my plate and kind of take the things that I like. And so Connie's the Morehead-Cain scholar and a tremendous musician, and so I took some of that. And then my brother Q was kind of an athlete, and so I grabbed that. My brother Josh was real smooth in the way that he talks, and so I would grab some of that. And then I had sisters who were really good at engaging with people and the emotional connection that they had, or they were multi-sport athletes, or they were great cooks. And so I could take bits and pieces and decide how I wanted to combine it to be mine. And then there were things that I did that none of them had done. So I was the first person in my family to study abroad. I was the first person in my family to live abroad for an extended period of time. And so it was taking everything they had, customizing it, and then building upon it. That was really important for me, respecting what they had done, but not letting that cause me to be in a box. That's how I approached it.
Great. Up next is Kimball Sheehan.
Hello, Ray. Thank you for sharing your story with us. So I wanted to ask you about how Morehead-Cain helped you develop your storytelling ability and your ability to reflect on past situations, which you may have viewed as a failure at the time, and put an optimistic and positive spin on them.
How Morehead helped me develop that? Well, I think being in the presence of other people, I didn't often feel like I had a particular area of expertise. And so I found myself observing a lot. And I think oftentimes we listen in environments to be able to respond, and we don't always listen to understand or to comprehend. And so when I was in those environments and I was listening to understand, I felt like I had a deeper appreciation for whatever environment that I was in, which means that my account of that experience was going to be a lot more thorough than someone else who was only viewing it from their individual point of view. So a lot of that is through observation and elements like that. Another element I would add, I guess, is I certainly don't want to discount the disappointments that I faced. There were certainly disappointments I faced at Carolina. There were certainly things within Morehead that I could have taken better advantage of. And I never want anyone to see that it is perfect. But by telling those stories and putting that moment of inspiration, often that draws people's attention, and that allows them to be more receptive to hearing about the disappointments so we can work together to improve it. Versus if I come in super strong out the gate, they may put up their defenses to a point that they can't even hear what I'm saying. And so I think those are some of the approaches I cultivated over my time in Morehead and beyond.
Thanks, Ray. That's great. Bomi Shah is next.
Hi, I just want to say the way you spoke was just so inspirational. I think we can all take some of the inspiration from that public speaking, but I wanted to ask something a little bit unrelated. But when you are trying to make decisions, whether it be through Morehead-Cain and trying to figure out how you would like to spend your summers, what kind of was the process in your head when you decided whether you should stick to your instinct, or if it was more of something where you had to really think through it and try to pick the best choice? So, how do you best work with decision making?
This is something that I'm still developing, so it's a timely question. I think that for me, there's been different extremes. Sometimes it's make a decision as fast as possible. Other times it's gather every piece of detail that I can about the decision before I make it. And I'm actively striving to be somewhere in the middle. It's also based on the magnitude of the decision. So if I'm waking up this morning trying to decide what shirt to put on, I'm probably going to be more on this side because it's not that important. Pick a shirt, get on with the day, let's get it going. But if it's, what am I going to do with my career? Maybe I do want to gather a bit more data and stuff like that. So placing that decision in terms of its importance and its magnitude, knowing that there will always be more information to gather. At some point, we will have to make a decision. If we've gathered that amount of information, I found that often there isn't a such thing as a bad decision or a right decision and a wrong decision. I believe that everyone on this call is going to be successful in life. Those decisions are, which road am I taking to arrive at my success? So you make the best decision you have with the information you have, and then that's your decision. You say, yep, we're on our way to success now. I'm gonna deal with what I got. And then when you get to another decision point, you make that best decision with the information that you have, but you can have trust that it's all leading you to a positive destination because that's where you're intending to go. And so that's how I think about it. I do appreciate having my own board of directors, if you will, people that I will go to, but I don't want to ask too many people for input on the same question, because then am I doing what they want me to do? Or am I doing what I actually wanted to do? So gather information, but the decision is yours. And that's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Ray, next, Mercy Atacola has a question for you.
Hi, Ray. I think I speak for everyone here when I say that we cannot thank you enough for your words today. And as aspiring and current public speaker, I know that your storytelling and the ways that you told your story were absolutely inspirational to me. And honestly, learning some of the techniques you did, you had some pauses in there when you were speaking. So that's something that I'm definitely going to try and pick up as well. My question to you centers more around your aspect of imposter syndrome. I know that my imposter syndrome is really more in my identity, but in regards to Morehead-Cain, my question is to, like, what advice would you give to students that are out of state or even out of the country on how to navigate the imposter syndrome that comes in when you are surrounded by people who may know each other in the same state. Some of the counties you guys are talking about, I didn't know them because I didn't live in North Carolina. So what advice would you give to students out of state, out of the country in regards to imposter syndrome, coming into a new space, coming into a new state, and navigating that area?
Yeah, so if you are experiencing imposter syndrome, congratulations. If we look throughout history, if we look in present day, there's a lot of extremely successful people who have experienced imposter syndrome. Some folks even offer that imposter syndrome is a symptom of being highly successful because you're always striving for something else and putting yourself in new environments. And so being kind to yourself is the first thing I always say. The other thing is, any environment you're in, it gets better when you show up because you bring something that nobody else can bring. Even if they're from your same city, they've gone to your same school, they've done your same activities, they didn't see it the way that you saw it. So you always have something to offer. That's a small message you can tell yourself when you're in those environments and you feel like, I don't know if this is for me. And then, are there small ways for you to step out of your comfort zone? Is that speaking up the tiniest bit in the conversation? Is that asking a different point of view? Is that speaking one-on-one with somebody that you probably wouldn't have spoken with otherwise? Is that doing something that represents who you are? Finding those small moments to interject. I know there's been times in California where I'll throw in a little bit of my North Carolina slang and swag, and they don't really understand it. And so that's a small mechanism of me saying, hey, I have something to offer to this environment. And so while I don't have a secret to make imposter syndrome disappear, those small actions hopefully will compile over time.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Sure.
So Ray, I don't know if you have a clock around you, but we're pushing up against our time, and we would love to beg a few extra minutes from you. As you can see, there's still a lot of raised hands, but I don't want to impose if you have a hard stop at 2. I mean,
if you are willing, I can stay a little bit longer.
Awesome, good. Well, we will get through as many more as we can, maybe 5-10 minutes. Would that work?
Yeah, and I'll try to talk a little bit faster too.
Oh no, you're doing great. Everything's wonderful. Wonderful. Well, thank you. Good. Next up then is Hunter Teague.
Hi, Ray. Thank you so much for sharing. I really appreciate your time that you took to tell this story. And I'd like to ask you about the Morehead community. And a large part of your story was how you can sometimes unintentionally have an impact on others. And how has the Morehead community fostered the ability to have an impact on others? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, you probably are well aware of the formal ways with internships and the alumni network and the mentoring programs and the globally distributed community. All those things are really well, but one quick example I'll give is of Steve Tobin, an alumni out here in the Bay Area. And I remember being at a gathering and I was talking with Steve and my new wife. She was next to me and he was listening to what we had to say, but the room was too loud. And instead of him faking his way through the conversation, he asked if we would pause, found us a quiet place at the venue, and said, "Now please continue." That showed me that he wasn't going through the motions of small talk and chit chat at an event, but he was actually invested in what we had to say. And that's something that has stuck with me. You won't see that on a website, but people who are genuinely connected to the person that they see and not just how they can advance their network. That was really important to me.
So Ray, I'm sorry, go ahead. Good, I think that was just a thank you. I do want to say Steve Tobin is on the call and I'm going to embarrass him and make him unmute and say hello to you. You are muted, Steve. Okay, he's waving. He may not be able to do so, but if you scroll over, you can see his wonderful face. So good. Next up then, we have Timothy McClendon to ask your question.
Hello, Ray. First, I'd just like to thank you and everyone else for doing this because this presentation has been phenomenal. It gone past all of my beliefs of what a virtual weekend can do. Not only do we have the obviously esteemed speaker, Ray Sawyer, but like his older brother who inspired him was able to come on, and then essentially who is his protege, Ray's protege, Sasha, was also able to speak as well. This is just a little overwhelming, but I'm really enjoying it. But I'd like to ask a question because you spoke about your marching band experience. And I actually will say that I researched you a little beforehand, and I saw that not only you, and not only your older brother, but like so many of your siblings also who went to UNC went through the marching band. And as a student who has played in the marching band my entire school year and is currently disappointed that I did not get a marching band senior experience, but I am still on the fence on whether I should do it in college. I would like to hear a little more about your experience in UNC's marching band.
Yeah, so I'll keep this one short because I have so many memories about the marching band. You're correct. There was a 17-year stretch where at least one member of the Sawyer family was in the UNC marching band. And so I literally grew up watching them play on Saturdays from being a little kid until I was in the band myself. I think it was a tremendous way for me to make friends. It was an opportunity for me to give back because I served in the band in different capacities to support the music program at UNC. Carolina sports, being acutely connected to that, traveling with football teams, traveling with the basketball team, and just having fun. I think it really created that college experience to me because a lot of people experienced that Saturday, for example, but I was a part of creating that experience. And so I think it was tremendous for me. Even if you don't do marching band, there's a lot of band programs, concert bands, jazz ensembles, things like that to get involved with. And so I can't speak highly enough about it. If you want to get into more details, hit me up offline and we could chop it up.
Thank you. I think I will definitely do that.
Awesome. Yeah, we will provide Ray's contact information for all of you because I know you're going to want to follow up. Next up is Isabella Grandick.
Hi, Ray. Thanks so much for bringing your energy and your amazing words. My question is, what is the Morehead-Cain value that you've struggled the most in achieving excellence in? And I'm inspired by the book that we got sent with all sorts of cool values from curiosity to self-awareness. you can also think about the question in terms of your own personal value that you've struggled the most in achieving balance in.
I'm pausing on that one. I think the one that I work on the most is finding the strength in myself. I really appreciate the opportunity to draw and recognize the strength of others. But even as I talked about earlier with that 60-second commercial I have for myself, that's an intentional activity for me to build the muscle and reinforce that I have enough to be successful, that my success is not dependent upon someone else giving it to me. And while I always will appreciate those around me and leverage it, I am not waiting for someone else's permission to be successful. That's something that I can say, but it's a daily routine for me to enforce that.
Thanks so much, Ray.
For sure. Thanks for being here.
All right, Leah Clinton is up next.
Hi, Ray. Thank you again for taking the time to talk with us and just taking the extra time, I guess, to answer my question. But my question is more tailored towards the reflection aspect that you've shared with us of memories. So what advice would you give, or how would you say that we can find a balance between reflecting on the memories that have got us where we are, and also like looking at how like right now can take us to the future, but also living in the moment and not letting time go past you or spending too much time reflecting in the past?
For sure. That's also something I think about frequently. When I was traveling, something I would do in particular is I would not take a picture of something until I had experienced it. My first interaction with something had to be through my own eyes. And if I hadn't created a connection to it, I was not permitted to take in a photo of it. That was me intentionally deciding to be in the moment before I decided to make a memory. I think the same could be made true when we interact with folks. I don't know how often for you, but like if I'm getting together with family, it's like, oh, it's so good to see you. Let's take a picture. It's like, no. I need to connect with you first. Now, if I feel like we've connected, let's make a memory that reminds us of this connection. And then when I'm sad or I'm missing my family, or I'm thinking about how I want to contribute to my family, I can look back at that photo, recall the memory, and think about how I live in a way that causes us to have more of those memories or even better memories next time. And so it's not an exact science, but it's that idea that memories aren't birthed because we tell them to be birthed. They're birthed because we were present. And sometimes we have to remind ourselves of that so we know how we want to show up now and in the future. I hope that answers your question.
It did. Thank you.
All right, Joe Hinchcliffe is next.
Hi, Ray. Thanks for your time tonight or this afternoon. My question is, you talked a lot about in your original speech how people have ripple effects, be that unintentionally or intentionally. So I was wondering how experiences in your life have had ripple effects on you, possibly, because I was reading and you've done the like teaching English in Korea, but then you've gone on to doing work with underrepresented groups in tech, and I was wondering how you went from there to where you are now, and how those like experiences shaped who you are now.
Yeah, I would love to talk more about that. I'll be brief for now, but the thing that unifies all those experiences is the ability to be in a space and create space for other people to tell their stories. My English classroom in Korea, they learned English on accident because my primary goal was for them to express themselves, for them to communicate their opinions, and for them to learn different points of view. And so you've probably seen some of the different things that we would discuss in the classroom. One thing that sticks out is my last day of classes, the first semester, a student walks up to me, and I would give each student a handshake every day after we walked out of the classroom, every single day. The last student waves, he says, "Teacher, before you got here, I thought all Black people were no good. but you changed my mind. Thank you. That was an example of me creating space so they could grapple with some of those preconceived notions that they had and actually learn. When I think about underrepresented students that I've worked with previously, it's not telling them what to do, but it's showing them, hey, computer science is a way that you could potentially express yourself. I'm not forcing you down this path, but it's yours if you want it. And then to see folks that I've worked with now have full-time jobs in the tech industry, it brings it full circle. And so it's less about the environment and the arena and more about creating the space for people to see themselves present and valued there.
Awesome. Next up is Anna Mercer.
Hey, so thank you so much for sharing your story. In your previous responses, you touched a little bit on your study abroad experiences, and that's just something that I've always dreamed to do. So I was just wondering, what are some of your biggest impacts or key takeaways from your experiences?
Yeah, so I studied abroad in the southern part of Spain, in Granada, Spain. And one thing, the best decision I made studying abroad was not traveling while I studied abroad. A lot of the people there, they were in Spain, and so they used those long weekends to hop over to other parts of Europe. But I pretty much stayed put the whole time. And that meant that I had my favorite restaurants where the folks would recognize me. And I'd walk in, I wouldn't have to order. They already knew what was up. And I had my basketball crew of local folks who we could get together and have fun. And I knew where I'd like to hang out on sunny days. And so it felt like I actually lived there. My language skills improved, but I felt like I was a part of the community and I was able to learn a lot more intimately than I would have if I was only there Monday through Thursday. And so that's one thing I would absolutely suggest. I won't say suggest. I will say that that's one thing I've appreciated when I've traveled, is I've always tried to immerse myself in the place that I was in, adapt as much as possible to the way that people live there and not expect them to adapt to me.
All right, I think we have time for one more, and I'm going to call on Zuha and Michelle.
Hi, thank you so much. I know you've got a ton of these, but you're going to get another one. Thank you so much for your words. You mentioned storytelling, and you mentioned two words, and it makes me think of sort of Robert Frost and Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. How did you sort of come to love storytelling? Could you who are some storytellers that inspire you, if you have any?
When I think about my own lived experiences in the Black community, a lot of history is passed through stories. So I remember sitting at my grandfather's feet and he would tell me stories about how he met my grandmother or what it was like for him dropping out of school after 8th grade to help on the farm, and how those humble beginnings even led to something great. And so I've taken pieces from him. I also think about being the youngest in a family of 9 siblings. I didn't always get a word in those conversations and arguments. And so very early on, I recognized that you may not get to speak up a lot. So make sure your words matter when it's your turn. And so I think those different things, it was built up over time. I love watching other people as storytellers, but I don't over-index on that because I still want to be me. I don't want to be an upgraded version of someone else. I appreciate what they do, but I want to stick with what's authentic to me. And so that's a combination of all those lived experiences, people I've listened to, and the necessity of getting in the conversation when you're the youngest kid in a big family.
Thank you so much. That's great.
Wonderful. Thank you, Zuha. And Ray, I mean, I hardly know what to say. This is so amazing. I do want to say Steve Tobin has written you a note in the chat. And Steve, if you're able to get your self unmuted, I know it would be great for you to come on screen if you can. All right, so I am thinking that may not happen, but do read his note. It's very sweet.
Yes, I hear you, Steve.
Oh, yay, there he is. Yeah, so good. And listen, just, again, cannot thank you enough for the opportunity to spend time as a community and to hear and think about the importance of our memories and the importance of storytelling. And and also just for your patience, for sticking with us. I know this is beyond the time that you had given to us, and we appreciate that gift.
Thanks for your time, everyone. It's a pleasure seeing all of you. Thanks for the questions and the participation.
And we promise we will provide, for the finalists, we'll provide, if I hope that's okay with you, Ray, we're going to give folks your contact information so they can email you and follow up. We had a couple of people who said they had a question, but it was kind of long and they were going to email it too, if you don't mind. So we'll do that. And then also just want to remind everybody, alumni especially, scholars, that next week is another 7 Talk. Julie Huffaker, class of 1991. She's going to talk about new, innovative ways of leading teams and organizations, the good, the bad, and the uncomfortable, she says. So we can't wait to hear that. And you can learn more about Julie and RSVP on the MCN. So thank you all so much for being here. If you'd like to put a little note in the chat, we'll make sure that we export all of those notes and pass those along to Ray, because I know he'll enjoy seeing all that.